Hey, Sip and Talkers. It's your host, Joe, and with me as always, Sunny.
Okay, so you remember the last Q&A segment, right?
Yes.
Something really kind of weird happened.
What was that?
Well, brilliant idea for a 10-minute break. Just took it.
Ah, the break idea. I remember that.
And the room, nothing. Silence. I mean, I felt like I was serving up this perfect moment, you know? Just waiting for someone to jump in.
Perfect setup, yeah.
And honestly, I kind of expected Micky, our loyal listener, to be the one. He's a huge fan of that whole, calling things out style of humor.
Tsukkomi fan.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So that moment, or really the lack of a moment, it got us thinking. This deep dive, it's definitely inspired by Micky in that, silence. But it's really for anyone who's curious about why some jokes land and others just fall flat.
Maybe unintentionally a great example of how deep our sense of humor runs with cultural expectation. And we've been looking at some really interesting material that digs into the mechanics of different comedy styles, specifically Japanese Tsukkomi and Boke, American humor, and British humor, too.
Right. So our mission today is basically to unpack these styles. What makes them work, what kind of cultural background they come from, and why do some jokes just travel the world easily while others seem to need a passport and still get lost? And yeah, we'll keep looping back to that Q&A moment and, Micky's notable silence after my idea vanished.
Yeah, the materials we looked at give us a great way to sort of view these different approaches, helps us see the patterns and the key differences.
Okay, so let's start where this whole thing kicked off Japanese humor, specifically that Boke and Tsukkomi dynamic. It's a style Micky really gets, and it is pretty unique.
It really is, and right at the heart of it is the Tsukkomi. The word itself, it comes from Tsukkomu, which means something like to insert or maybe to cut in. And in comedy, the Tsukkomi is that sharp, quick reaction. They're kind of the voice of common sense, jumping in to point out how absurd their partner, the Boke, is being.
Right, like the straight man in old comedy duos, but maybe with more energy. They react often with really big facial expressions or a certain tone of voice, maybe even that classic light tap on the head.
Exactly. Their whole job is to highlight just how ridiculous the Boke's statement or action is.
Makes sense.
And the Boke, well, they're the one creating the absurdity. They're intentionally saying or doing something illogical or over the top or just plain silly.
They're the setup guy.
For the setup artist, yeah. Throwing out the weirdness for the Tsukkomi to knock down.
It sounds like it's all about the timing then. This beautifully choreographed absurdity.
Oh, absolutely. The pace is critical. The Tsukkomi reaction has to be immediate. That quick back and forth, that rhythm is completely essential, especially in Manzai, which is that traditional two-person stand-up style.
Gotta be fast.
Yeah, that speed keeps the energy up. And those big reactions from the Tsukkomi, the loud what? Or the shocked face, they don't just correct the book, they actually amplify the whole comedic effect. Makes the book seem even funnier, even more ridiculous.
What's really interesting to me, though, is how this kind of reflects cultural stuff. It's not supposed to be actually mean, right?
No, not at all. It's playful, it's an exaggerated correction, but it happens within this context of group interaction. It subtly reinforces what everyone agrees is common sense, but does it with humor, not confrontation. It's about keeping things balanced socially through laughter.
Maintaining harmony, kind of.
Sort of, yeah. And it's not just on stage. This Boke Tsukkomi thing, it pops up in everyday conversations between friends. It's how buddies tease each other, Point out something silly someone did, strengthen the bond through that shared laugh.
Okay, so that everyday use really shows how deep it runs in the culture. It's called the soul of Manzai comedy, right? Especially from the Kansai region, like Osaka. You've got famous groups like Downtown or Chidori who are masters of this.
Oh, yeah, total masters. And you see it constantly on Japanese TV, especially variety shows.
Yeah.
People like Uchimura Toriyoshi or Ariyoshi Horiki. They're famous for their super sharp, fast Tsukkomi skills.
Yeah.
It's vital for keeping those shows lively, reacting to all the crazy stuff that happens.
So socially, it works like this humorous way to gently police things, pointing out when someone's being a bit off or silly without actually causing offense. It's like a correction wrapped in a punchline.
Exactly. And comparing it to other styles really highlights what makes it unique. Western stand-up is usually just one person, right?
Yeah.
A solo monologue. Manzai is fundamentally about that two-person interaction.
Yeah, totally different structure.
And even compared to, say, Chinese Shango or crosstalk, which also has two people with specific roles, the penguin and Duggan of the Japanese Tsukkomi often feels faster, maybe more physical, more exaggerated, and it seems more woven into just regular casual chat than the maybe more formal delivery of crosstalk sometimes. The examples really nail it. Like the book says, man, I saw the moon singing karaoke last night.
Chuckles.
And the Tsukkomi instantly fires back, the moon doesn't sing. What are you talking about? Or maybe the book says, my pet cat eats dinner with chopsticks.
No way.
Tsukkomi, cats don't use chopsticks. Are you serious? That immediate over-the-top pushback, that's the core of it.
Got it. Okay, so that's the Japanese style. Quick, exaggerated interaction focused on playfully reinforcing common sense. Now let's jump over the Pacific to American humor. Big shift in energy, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely a shift. American humor often feels, well, much more direct, louder, maybe, and it definitely leans into exaggeration pretty heavily.
Yeah, I can see that.
Think about the delivery style of a lot of stand-up comics or characters in American sitcoms. They tend to spell out the joke or the reaction very clearly.
Like Dave Chappelle or Kevin Hart. Very bold, big personalities. Or think about Homer Simpson eating that insanely spicy chili and tripping out. That's American exaggeration turned way up.
Totally. And sarcasm and irony, they're absolute staples, often delivered totally deadpan, which makes it funnier, like in the U.S. version of The Office, all those awkward moments.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's that flat tone delivering something kind of outrageous. Like we could sarcastically say, wow, Mickey, truly stellar intervention when Sunny snagged my idea. A real masterclass in just watching.
Chuckles, exactly. You have to pick up on the underlying sarcasm.
Right.
Another huge thing in American humor is pop culture. References to movies, celebrities, news, internet memes. They're everywhere.
Which is awesome if you're plugged into that stuff,
yes.
right? But if you're not.
Yeah, it can make a joke completely impossible to understand.
Yeah. Like
trying to figure out a Jimmy Fallon bit about some TikTok trend you've never even heard of. Just confusion.
Been there.
And physical comedy, slapstick. That is a really strong tradition too. Goes way back to vaudeville, but it's still huge. Think America's funniest home videos, or even the crazy stuff in Jackass. Someone tripping, falling, pie in the face still gets a laugh.
So if Mickey had just dramatically tripped over his own feet instead of saying anything about my idea, that would have been pure American slapstick.
Pretty much. A physical gag instead of a verbal one.
Okay. And culturally, what does American humor tell us? It seems maybe more about individualism, free expression.
I think that's a fair point. Comedians often push back against authority or social norms. They use their own personal voice to comment on things, like George Carlin did so effectively. It feels less about maintaining that group harmony we talked about with Japanese humor, and maybe more about the power of one person's wit or observation.
Yeah, a definite contrast to the Tsukkomi dynamic where it's all about the interplay reinforcing shared ideas. All right, let's hop across the Atlantic now to Britain. And this is a style that I think can be really puzzling for people who aren't, immersed in British culture, sometimes even more than American or Japanese styles.
Oh, absolutely. British humor is famous for being dry.
Yeah.
Very understated. It really values wit, subtlety, wordplay, and often it's delivered with a completely straight face. You, the listener, have to do some work to catch the joke.
Like Monty Python. Or the original Office with David Brent. That cringy awkwardness.
Exactly. That's prime British understatement and awkwardness. It definitely requires a certain sensibility. You might hear something that sounds totally normal, but the context, or just a tiny change in tone, tells you it's actually a joke.
You could even joke about Mickey's silence back then, saying it was drier than a week-old spoon and more understated than a royal nod, playing on this British stereotypes,
Chuckles. Perfect. And wordplay is huge. Puns, double meanings, clever phrasing, it's baked into the language, probably reflecting that strong literary history. And satire, mocking politics, class, social norms, often with a really sharp edge. Think Blackadder.
Right.
Even a phrase like a damp squib, meaning something that fizzles out, like a dud firework.
Yeah.
That's a classic bit of British idiom that works as a metaphor, but it's confusing if you don't know the saying.
And it can get dark, too, can it? That absurdist streak. Finding humor in pretty bleak stuff or things that feel taboo.
Definitely. The movie Death at a Funeral is a great example. Finding comedy in a really grim situation. That can feel really strange if you're not accustomed to laughing at things that seem quite serious on the surface.
So a British take on my stolen idea might be something like...
Well, someone might say completely deadpan. Ah, yes, Micky Tsukkomi.
Yeah.
Conspicuous by its absence. Perhaps it's emigrated. It's that dark, witty way of pointing out the lack of reaction.
And it's super context dependent, isn't it? Filled with references to class or specific regional access or social rules or history that you just wouldn't get unless you're really familiar with the UK.
Totally. Trying to watch a show like Keeping Up Appearances or, yes, Minister without understanding that background, you'd miss half the jokes.
Which leads us right into why this style can be so confusing, especially for someone maybe from an Asian cultural background like Taiwan or Japan, including our friend Micky.
Yeah, there's often a kind of cultural mismatch. Many Asian cultures, including Taiwan and Japan, tend to really value group harmony, right?
Yeah.
And maybe prefer more indirect communication or humor that's clearly playful and non-confrontational.
Like book it Tsukkomi.
Exactly. So British humor, with its sometimes biting sarcasm or satire that directly mocks authority or social rules, it can feel too sharp, too critical, maybe even a bit harsh compared to that cooperative comedic style.
The nuances in something like Monty Python making fun of bureaucracy or class might just fly over your head if you don't share that specific cultural frame. You might not even realize it is humor.
Precisely. And then there's the language barrier, which is massive, even if your English is pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
British humor is so packed with subtle meanings, slang, idioms, regional accents. That damp squib example, again, if you don't know the phrase, the humor is just lost. And the sarcasm often relies entirely on tone and context, which is really hard to pick up if you're mentally translating or not deeply familiar with those cues.
That subtle delivery is a huge difference, isn't it? Compared to the really clear, often exaggerated signals in book it Tsukkomi or the, straightforwardness of a lot of American humor. British deadpan makes you work for it. You have to read between the lines.
Definitely. If I had stolen your idea and a Brit just looked at me and said, "Oh, how very inventive, Sunny," with zero expression.
Micky might totally miss it. He'd be expecting a much bigger, clearer reaction like, "Hey, that's Joe's idea." He might just think it was a weird compliment.
Exactly. And the historical and social context is huge too. Jokes about specific British politicians or weird historical events or how Whitehall works. Like, yes, ministers, they just won't land without that background knowledge.
So looking at it from, say, a Taiwanese perspective, which Micky probably shares Taiwanese humor, often seems really high energy, right? Playful, sometimes physical, maybe similar in spirit to Japanese banter or even American slapstick. You see it in those lively variety shows.
Yeah, that feels right. Very energetic, very interactive.
So that kind of accessible, energetic style feels, well, more natural. And compared to that, the sort of brainy, dry, or even dark quality of a lot of British humor can feel pretty foreign.
Makes sense. So, okay, let's try and bring it all together, keeping Micky and that stolen idea moment in mind.
Let's do it. The scene of the crime.
American humor. Loud, direct, full of pop culture. The energy might actually align okay with Taiwanese variety shows in some ways, so maybe relatively easy to get.
Yeah.
If you'd stolen my idea, the American reaction might be a very clear, maybe loud, "Hey, Sunny, what gives?" That's my break idea.
Okay, clear and direct, then British.
British humor. Subtle, dry, super context-heavy. Unless Micky is really, really tuned into UK culture, it's probably not going to feel intuitive. A Brit might just offer that dry comment like, "Sunny, your contribution is certainly noted," leaving Micky scratching his head. Was that good? Bad.
Yeah.
Sarcastic.
Hard to tell. And Japanese, book Tsukkomi.
That's fast-paced, exaggerated interplay, very clear roles. Culturally, it feels much closer to the kind of playful banter common in Taiwanese humor. Micky would instinctively be waiting for that loud, exaggerated common-sense smackdown. A very clear, "Wait a second, Sunny. That's Joe's idea. What are you doing?"
Which brings us right back to the great silence of the Q&A. And me calling out poor Micky for not delivering that Tsukkomi. So, based on all this, why do you think it happened? Why the silence?
Well, maybe it ties back to that Taiwanese preference for more playful, less confrontational humor. Perhaps directly calling out a friend, even humorously like a Tsukkomi, feels less natural than just letting a slightly awkward moment slide with a laugh or ignoring it.
Could be. Less direct criticism, even funny criticism.
Or maybe, because he was expecting a bigger, clearer setup or signal more like Japanese or American styles, the moment itself just felt too subtle. It didn't trigger the Tsukkomi-needed alarm in the way he's used to.
That makes sense, too. It wasn't flagged clearly enough as absurdity alert.
Or, let's be honest, maybe he's just too nice a guy to roast you in front of everyone, even as a joke.
That is also entirely possible. Okay, well, Micky, if you're listening next time, we need the full Tsukkomi. Give us the classic, "Sunny, that's Joe's idea. Get your own ideas."
Chuckles.
Right.
So wrapping it up, Japanese book Tsukkomi is about that quick, exaggerated, harmony-focused interplay. American humor is often bold, direct, relies on pop culture. And British humor, subtle, dry, deeply tied to cultural and linguistic context.
Seeing these differences really shows why humor doesn't always travel well. A joke that absolutely kills in London might just get blank stares in Tokyo or Los Angeles, and vice versa.
It's a fantastic reminder that humor isn't just jokes and punchlines. It's a mirror reflecting how different cultures see the world, how they communicate, how they interact.
Yeah. So next time you're watching a comedy show or just chatting with people from different places, maybe you'll start to notice these different comedic languages being spoken. It can really open up new ways to appreciate what's going on and maybe connect a bit better.
Absolutely. And it leaves you with something to think about, maybe. If humor reflects culture, what does the stuff you find genuinely funny say about your own cultural background or your values, or maybe just how you prefer to engage with the world around you?
Ooh, that's a good one. A deep thought to mull over. Thanks again for providing the source materials that let us do this deep dive today. It was really, really interesting.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. Glad we could explore it.
And hey, speaking of exploring genuinely fun stuff, if you want to see some actual playful banter, maybe some cool memes, music talk, wine tasting adventures, travel vlogs, you should definitely check out our friend Micky's YouTube channel. Seriously, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely give it a look. Good content over there.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive and want to keep exploring more fascinating topics like this one, often drawn directly from materials you might provide, make sure you subscribe. We'd love to have you along for the next one.